Welcome to Season 4 of Might in Motion, the podcast that champions motivation, momentum, mindfulness, and might. I'm Marianna Kinnee, your host, bringing you conversations with inspiring leaders and innovators who challenge the status quo and push boundaries in their careers and lives. Whether you're here to grow, lead, or ignite your own journey, we're here to keep you moving forward. Let's dive in. Today, I get to bring to you Paul Faronbi. Paul is a certified Maxwell Leadership coach, a speaker, and trainer. He has a passion for leadership and loves to mentor students in STEM. When he's not traveling for work, you can usually find him traveling for STEM conferences. In his free time, you'll either find him in the gym or trying out new foods because he considers himself an avid lover of food. He is a person of faith and believes that Jesus comes first and he comes second. So that's why he enjoys adding value to people however he can. Paul speaks to students and professionals around the nation and has a show where he talks with incredible people doing incredible things so we can become the most incredible version of ourselves. I am so excited, IncrediPaul, to have you here.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I am so excited to be here, Marianna. Thanks for having me on the show.
We had such a lovely conversation when we met, probably it was before Christmas. It's been a
Yeah,
minute.
it's
And
been a
I
while.
just, I walked away feeling really energized from that conversation. And I think it's because of your love of STEM resonates with me and in my background.
Yeah.
It's a fun area to be in. And so I'm curious, what was your origin story? What sparked that interest and put you on a path to engineering?
Yeah, that's a really good question with engineering and STEM as a whole, engineering being the E in STEM. And I think for me, it was loving math and science growing
Hmm.
up. So I when I was growing up, I thought for the longest time I wanted to be a doctor up until I got into college. And really, if you can believe it or not, engineering was a backup plan for me, chemical engineering. So I studied chemical engineering as a backup plan. And reflecting back, I think it was because I wanted to do something a little bit different. So my dad is an engineer, and I was like, I'm gonna do something different. And then I realized I like math and science. I should just go into engineering, fell in love with it. Did a
Mhm.
lot of stuff in undergraduate research in engineering. So I got to work in a biomedical type of research, got to work in a biology lab as well as a chemical engineering lab, did some research regenerating nerve cells. It was funded by the National Science Foundation and the US Army. So I got to do a lot of stuff that engineers don't typically get to do. So I got to do a lot of cell microscopy, also got to culture cells, and then do the chemical engineering stuff, working with different types of polymers and conduits. And so that was really a lot of stuff I did in undergrad while I was going to classes,
Mm.
being involved in student organizations, was highly involved in, we were talking about a little bit earlier, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, even though I don't have a drop of Hispanic blood in my body, but I was super involved in that organization really for 3.5 years while I was in college, involved in the National Society of Black Engineers as well.
Mhm.
Actually had an opportunity to start a student organization called iResearch, focused on research in STEM. So I think that was kind of my origin story, being in a household that my dad was an engineer and just growing up really loved math and science and just kept going towards it.
I think that's why we are kindred spirits because I came from a legacy of engineers as well. Like my father, my grandfather,
Oh wow.
they were both electrical engineers. I started off Kimmy, so mad props to you for actually becoming a Kimmy. I bailed. I went to industrial engineering. I'm like, give
There
me a
you
good
go.
process map and I'm happy. But I think that's what's so cool about the engineering space. You mentioned working with cells and with polymers, and I spent time working in a paper mill. It's
Mhm.
like, but then you have the gamut of industrial engineering, for example, really gets into how do you move things better, right? That could be
Mhm.
people through a hospital. It could be trucks on the road. It's making processes better, and so there's
Yeah.
this full gamut that engineers really can do. And I think that's
Yeah,
what's so exciting, that you could take those passions that you had and apply it.
absolutely.
Um, you know, industry leaders, I think, have an obligation, right, to foster and help encourage more people to go into some of these STEM type fields, and engineering as being a great example. What are you think some ways that as leaders within the industry we could do a better job of reaching out and helping others get excited about it?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the stuff that we're doing, but just doing more of it. So
Mhm.
one of the things that got me excited while I was in college was having different people in industry come to talk to classes or different student organizations, just talk about what it means to be a real life engineer. Because a lot of stuff
Um,
we do in the classroom, like it, some of it can translate directly to the real world, a lot of it does not. And you just have to understand this is what I tell people, and I tell students especially, is that really as an engineer or in STEM, but I think especially as an engineer, we're taught to solve problems, technical problems, and we learn how to do that in engineering school. And so I think it's exposing them to all the different types of engineers because I think a lot of times when people say engineer, they might think of someone that's behind the scenes doing software engineering or computer engineering. I think that's like the stereotypical type of engineer.
mhm.
But I mean, there's civil engineering as well, which all this stuff that has to do with the roads and bridges and all this other stuff. And there's materials engineering has to go with like materials. A lot of stuff goes on the biomedical side.
Yeah.
Engineers really in everything we do. And I think being more intentional about showcasing the fact that this is what engineers do, this is what it looks like. And I think that's how you can get people more excited about it, actually being upfront with it, whether it's in college. And I think a lot more people are doing stuff even younger, which I think is important. I haven't done as much of it. I've been more focused on college and young professionals, but even in middle school and high school, getting them excited about it.
Yeah, it's, I have kids and they're 8 and 11. They're two girls. And there's these really cool boxes that you can get, on a monthly subscription that dive into different STEM aspects, and that, or and sometimes STEAM as well, where there's like an art
Yeah.
aspect, right? But it's amazing because, like, just the other day they got a box and all of a sudden my daughter comes in, she made a windmill, she turns on the fan, she's showing me how it works, and like why wind power can generate a pump. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, you're 11. At 11 I was not thinking about engineering, but it's so cool that there's these things out there that are, I think, pulling more people and showing more people that there's some fun aspects to it. It's not just, I'm typing on a computer, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think is cool.
Absolutely, especially what you mentioned that, getting little girls involved. There's a
Mhm.
huge shortage of women in STEM, and then when you have that shortage, it's like we've seen in AI a lot, is that we as humans are inherently biased, and when you don't have enough people that represent the broader population in a field, you're not gonna be able to make things that cater to everyone. There's gonna be a lot of bias. So that's why I'm also passionate about people who are underrepresented in STEM, getting them more involved, whether it's women,
Yeah.
African Americans, Blacks, Mexicans, all Hispanics, all these people, because I wanna make sure that when you have diversity, that makes things better for all people, not just some
Mhm.
people.
Yeah. When you say that, the first thing I think of is when I get in the car and a seatbelt never really fits me right, you know? Like, I'm short, and it's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, man, I wi," but if you think about it, who may have designed the vehicle is probably, a male that's
Yeah.
5'10" or taller, not a female
Mhm.
that's, 5'2", right? So
Exactly.
it's interesting that you brought that. Even with, like, just managing processes and trying to make processes better, having that different perspective creates better solutions, which is really, really cool.
Absolutely.
Now, in a recent newsletter, because you're really big on having newsletters come out via LinkedIn, and I highly recommend listeners, go out there, check it out, subscribe, because I think it's all really value add stuff that you put out there. But
Thank
you
you.
talk specifically about the difference between being reactive versus responsive. And I really want to know more.
Yeah, reactive versus responsive. So I think a lot of times it's really easy to be reactive. So someone might say something or do something, and we're in the moment. We want to do it right away. But The perfect example, I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's been booming, and there's way more people than infrastructure is built for, so there's traffic. And so there's people cutting you off, trying to merge, sometimes honking. A lot of times they don't even honk. They just cut you off. You don't even know what's happening. You have to be on your guard always. And so being reactive would be getting really mad, upset, flipping them off, a few four-letter words slipping out. And that all of that, what that does is just raise your anxiety, raise your cortisol levels, all these different things, and it's not good for you. But being responsive is really taking the time to, and I would say it takes practice, and it just comes by being intentional, because like I said, reactiveness is something that we're more naturally prone to do as humans, kind of like fight or flight, which I'm not going to get too technical into that because that's not what I study. It's just what I've read and seen. But when you're reactive, it's not a great place to be, because it just happens. And a lot of times you regret what you did in the moment. When you're responsive, you're taking the time to pause, and it could be 5-10 seconds before you respond, before you really do anything, to think about, okay, like, and this is what I do. This helps. Like, this might not be anything. This might not be what the person's actually thinking, but a lot of times when we're in a rush, we're only thinking about ourselves, and maybe that person is on the way. Maybe that guy had bad news, or they're in a rush. They have a huge deadline, whatever it is, and they're not thinking about any of the people around them. They're just trying to get to their destination. And so I just happen to be a bystander there. So I don't try and take things personal. I think a lot of times with being reactive and responding is not taking things personal. I think maybe sometimes people are trying to do something directly to you, but thinking that is only going to make you feel more negative emotions. And at the end of the day, when something happens to you, you can't change it. It's already happened. The only thing you can change and manage is your response.
Yeah, that's powerful, and so it's so true in so many varieties of places, right? Like you mentioned, maybe getting cut off in traffic. I spend a lot of time at warehouses and work a lot with truck drivers, and they may
Oh
come in and they may have like a bad attitude, right?
man.
And there's just such a magic when you can respond in something that's a positive, because you can actually see the stress melt, right? You don't know what they just dealt with. You don't know if they got cut off in traffic, or maybe they're running low on hours, or whatever the case may be. But when you respond in a slightly different way, it creates just this really cool moment, and then that moment has a ripple effect to somebody else down the line.
Absolutely. And when it is like you were mentioning, like with truck drivers, so when you're seeing face to face in the car, sometimes you can't, like, you're saying things but no one can actually hear you. It's just like reading words, reading your lips. Like a lot of times I'm able to see like someone gets really aggressive or really excited about something, and then when I come in and I just even keel, like they calm down. A lot of times they end up apologizing, because they'll talk about, oh, it's like, sorry, I was rushing, or this is going on, that's going on. And now all of that just comes with emotional intelligence, which is it's a constant process. I can't say I always do it right, because I don't think anyone always does it right. I think it also helps that I'm more naturally a laid back person. So I won't say that I'll just let anyone walk over me, but I'm really intentional, just reading the situation. Okay, is this person like in the middle of something, or is this person more so trying to just exert something over me because I think they can, and I just put them in their place, like, no, we're not going to do that. So it's a balance. It takes practice. You're not always going to get it right. I think it's just being patient with yourself, because we can be our own worst critics, especially with high achievers. So like everything I do in IncrediPaul's, people who are incredible, and we can be hardest on ourselves and not celebrate the small wins, which is what I've been telling myself and telling people, to celebrate the small wins.
Yeah, I love that. And it is practice. It's just like working out, in
Hmm.
in the intro, we talked about how like you enjoy working out. It's a muscle, right? And you have to create that muscle memory. And then sometimes we make mistakes, and
Yeah.
it's just how quickly you can like rebound from that. That it kind of goes into the thought process of like resilience, right? You think of a rubber
Yes.
band, if you pull it, I had one yesterday that broke on me, right? And so it's like, oh, that rubber band was not very resilient anymore. It had been stretched too far. But I'd love to know your thoughts on how resiliency can actually maybe play a part in coming back with being more responsive versus reactive, and like how you could be. I think you mentioned like bitter or better, right? Like there's an opportunity. I love the
Oh,
bees. I love the
yeah,
alliteration, right? But tell us a little bit more about resiliency and how people can work that muscle.
absolutely. So resilience, and I give a talk on resilience too. I think what I really start off with is saying that rejection and failure is inevitable. It's going to happen at some point. If it's not happening or it's never happened, I would argue that you're not either. It's one of two things. You're either not doing anything or you're lying to yourself. Either way, it's probably not in a good spot. So just understanding that it's going to happen. I think a lot of times we get caught up when we're trying to be successful is that we're being careful because we don't want to fail. But failure is just stepping stones to success. Without failure, we can never succeed. And we often learn way more from our failures than we do from our successes. I know, like, even in high school or in college, there are a lot of people who went through it that was super easy for them, super smooth, and it went to college and it got hard. I know that was for me. Like, high school was really easy for me, and I didn't really I studied, but I didn't study that hard. It was just came easy for me. And then college, I hit a roadblock. And I was like, okay, obviously I didn't learn how to study. Like, now I need to learn how to study all these different things. But with any situation, like we mentioned, talking about getting bitter or better, and it goes with the response of the reactivity, is that with any situation, you can get better from it or you can get bitter from it, whether it's a relationship that's broken up or a failure from a job, getting let go. In the end, like, those things happen and they're not good things inherently, but we can learn from those things to make us better. And what I talk about resilience is that a lot of it is your environment. So maybe it's your physical environment, like where you live, which sometimes you can't always control that. But really examining who are the people you're surrounding yourself with, whether it's people that physically or you're in different groups or organizations outside of work. But it's really understanding what is getting into your subconscious, what is your self-talk. Because I say this to people all the time, is that if you were to say half the things you said to yourself to your friend, would they still be your friend? And a lot of times we'd be like, probably not, because we're super critical of ourselves. So it's like, why would we tell ourselves things we wouldn't tell a friend? So it's being really careful with our self-talk.
Yeah, I mean, and your brain doesn't know the difference. Like if
Yeah.
you're having those thoughts, your brain thinks it's real in reality,
Yeah.
but it's maybe not
Yeah.
reality.
Mhm.
So Paul, like if you could look ahead 5 years from now and maybe like tell the future you something, or like where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'd love to kind of know how you think about like that looking ahead, and your perspective you have on what you see ahead of you.
So myself in 5 years. Wow. That's a good one. I haven't thought about. I've been more so trying to, like, thinking longer term or like in the immediate.
Ooh,
I think
longer
my
term is even better. Like how far in the future are you thinking? Like I love that. That's a really positive self-talk right there.
Yeah, so I think I have a lot of different goals and dreams,
Mm,
aspirations of, like, starting multiple companies, a lot of different things. So I'm doing a lot of stuff in leadership right now with IncrediPaul. The whole brand with IncrediPaul is focused on becoming the most incredible versions of ourselves.
mm,
And so I think of it like leadership is one piece. With I'd say that it's not soft skills, it's life skills or leadership skills. The other thing I can
mhm,
think about is stuff on the finance side of things. So I've
mhm,
been fortunate enough to learn a lot of things pretty early on, being able to have a good credit score, to buy a home, to buy another home, and be a landlord at the same time that I have a home, and then learning that process, as well as a little bit on the investing side of things. So that's stuff I haven't really talked about at all. But
mhm.
at some point, I feel like with the whole self being more incredible, there's stuff on the finances I want to do. And then maybe in the fitness side, like I said, I like working out. And so I think sometimes it's not like I'm going to be like, oh, like lose 100 pounds in a year or anything like that. I think it's more so for people who are busy professionals and just want a way to be able to stay in shape. It's not like they're trying to get like crazy fit, but they want to make sure they're at a good fitness level. Maybe it's some stuff with meal planning, all that stuff. But it would be
Mhm.
something really simple, and then even more stuff on the side of maybe in investing and like real estate, which I'm still learning all that stuff. But so I think that's way longer down the road to have like an incredible enterprise of these different
Yeah.
side sides of it. So, but I think 5 years down the road is probably doing more of this, but
Mhm.
probably only focus on the Incredible Paul brand and doing the stuff on the nonprofit side. So still working full time as an engineer. I'm loving it. And I think it's great because I love the organization I work with, but at the same time, there's limitations on my time and what I can do, what I can't do.
Mhm.
So I think longer term, 5 years would be if I am still doing engineering work, it would be more so consulting and it'll be me doing it independently as opposed to working for a corporation.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm still learning some stuff because right now I work as an R&D engineer, and so I've been worked in a few different functions. I've worked in continuous improvement, which I know goes hand in hand in IE. I've done some stuff on the technical side, on the packaging side, and process side, and now in R&D. So this is pretty new over the last year. So I want to do more of that, really learn it really well before I decide to kind of go on my own. So I think in the next 5 years, potentially would be full blown Incredible nonprofit. And then from there, I can build, like, as I'm building on that, I can build out the enterprise and do more.
So, we've mentioned IncrediPaul, but you haven't like dove into that too much in this conversation. So I want to do that now.
Okay.
Who does IncrediPaul help?
Yeah.
And like if people are like, wow, that sounds really interesting. Tell us like what that means and like how people can learn more about it.
Absolutely. So, Incredible, I say the mission is empowering young professionals in STEM to become the most incredible versions of themselves. And so there are different iterations of that. So I started it, it will be coming up. Actually, by the time this comes out, it might already be around the time it's been 5 years since I initially started it. But
Nice.
thank you. It's looked different over the years. And I've honestly been doing a lot of stuff with the speaking side of it and panels and workshops. Even while I was in college, I was helping
Mhm.
to coordinate a lot of that stuff. And then right after I got out of college, helped found like an alumni association for underrepresented group. So it's called the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. My local chapter or local alliance at Iowa State was an Inspire Alliance. So got to do that for 3 years, and that spun off to do more stuff with Incredible. And then so I in 2020 was a busy year for me. Everything slowed down. And I was like, April 2020, I started Incredible. October 2020, started the nonprofit I lead right now that's more on the national level that works with universities and colleges across the country. So that's been really exciting. And that nonprofit is NALA STEM, National
Mm.
Alliance Lead Acceleration of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. And our mission is to unite, support, and build community among all historically excluded peoples in STEM.
Love it. That's awesome. And I think, so many people's lives, people were able to take a pivot in 2020,
Mhm.
and obviously you leverage that opportunity to do the same. And I think that's going to help so many other people continue to make, improvements in their lives. And so that's just really awesome. People are listening or watching because we have both, and they might be like, how do I best get in touch with Paul? Right. And so I know we'll put all these in the show notes, but if you were to direct somebody, like where would you direct them to?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to get in touch with me is if you search Incredible.
Mhm.
The funny thing, is quick story about that is that when I was looking at different names, Incredible was like a nickname growing up, and I found there was one other website, incredible.com, that was a graphic designer in Switzerland. And
Oh,
so for the
neat.
longest time, every time I searched IncrediPaul, his was always the first one that came up. But over the last year, with all the stuff I've been putting out, I'm now like the first 5 that come up. So if you
Yay.
search, yeah, so if you search IncrediPaul, it'll come up. So it's IncrediPaul.org because he has IncrediPaul.com. So if you don't see anything about STEM or speaking, just graphic designing, it's not me. IncrediPaul.org. And then you can see all the stuff I do with podcasting. My newsletter stuff is on there. You can connect with me on socials, IncrediPaul there. You can go to my personal LinkedIn as Paul Faronbi. I've been posting more so on the IncrediPaul one and reposting it to mine. But either way, if you want to stay connected and all the stuff I do with leadership, especially, and do a lot of stuff in personal growth, go there. And then Instagram is the letter I, the letter M, IncrediPaul. And that's how you can
Nice.
stay connected.
This was so enlightening. I really love talking with you, and I just want to share some of the highlights that I wrote down as we talked about before I went on. I love my little handy pen, and your background, you loved math and science growing up, and so engineering was actually your backup plan. Like you wanted to be a doctor, and then you said, "Hey, wait a minute, this is actually kind of cool. You get to work with cells, and you get to work with a whole bunch of different things, and it allowed you to get involved." And so you ended up just pivoting to chemical engineering, and I think that's awesome because I hear so many people go the other way. They start off as chemical engineers and they end up being a doctor. So I love hearing that the opposite of that.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about how, as an industry, how we can foster or encourage more people to get into these fields, especially if they're underrepresented. And you talked about how having different people at the table it really allows you to solve problems in a more effective and efficient way. And there's opportunity to go back, right? To go back to maybe your high school or your college and speak to people about what you're doing in the engineering or STEM space, because it helps open up their eyes on what opportunities are out there. We spent a lot of time talking about reactive versus responsive, and the great traffic example. You get cut off, you can react in a certain way, like certain words, certain hand gestures, right? And it just raises everything negative in your life.
Yeah.
But if you can take that moment, you talked about like taking a pause and have a positive response instead of a negative reaction. Takes practice, takes being really intentional in what you're doing, but that pause allows you to actually not only calm yourself down, but the other person. And that then opens up an opportunity for collaboration and to, maybe if you're in a project team or whatever, to actually create a better situation, from your team, or you could even be in your own household, right? And that reactive versus responsive, when you can be more responsive, then it builds resilience. And so we talked a little bit about how rejection and failure are inevitable. And those failures are really what allow you to be successful in the long term. You got to do hard things to grow that part of your brain that allows you to actually do more hard things. And that you have that opportunity to say, hey, if I am, experiencing a failure or experiencing rejection, I have an option to either get better or be bitter. And when you choose to get better, then more positive things are going to happen. It's a never ending positive cycle. And you even mentioned sometimes your environment, the people you surround yourself with. And we've all know that, right? Your water cooler conversation. If you're with the one that's always negative, guess what? Everything's going to come up with a negative spin. But if it's that one person that's constantly positive, it really turns things around. And then you shared more about what you do with the IncrediPaul, and with your nonprofits on, really helping young professionals to become their most incredible selves, and helping, across the country with universities on improving and increasing the likelihood of underrepresented people in STEM. And I think that's awesome. It's a great mission statement that you have with both, those organizations, and excited to see what happens in the next 5, 10, 15 years, because obviously so much growth in this past 5. And it's just up for you, I think. So this has been a great conversation, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us at Might in Motion and sharing your story.
Yeah, I'm so excited you had me on. It was a great conversation. Love your podcast. Love what you're doing. Really uplifting everyone. It's been incredible.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Might in Motion. Remember, every step forward counts, and the power to create momentum starts with you. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It makes a huge difference. Until next time, stay inspired, stay mindful, and keep moving with might.